Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
All right, welcome back to podcast 11 of 2019. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can tweet me at the Public Dog, and you can tweet us at the Odds Breakers. My friends, we have a fantastic show for you today. We have a new guest and long-time handicapper, Jimmy Boyd, to come on and educate us about some of his takes in college basketball and break down some information on key numbers. This episode is being sponsored by uwager.eu. For a 50% sign-up bonus, please visit uwager. Use the promo code THEODDSBREAKERS. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a member for $12.99 a month, and we will give you our picks and premium picks before the line moves. For $2 more, you can become a patron subscriber and also get the podcast a little bit early. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. I'd like to start this episode out with a little news here. Obviously, if you're under a rock, Zion Williamson sprained his knee 1 minute into that North Carolina game. Brutal for Duke. You know, he's their most electric player, maybe their best player, Barrett and him. You can make any arguments, but him going out in the first minute of this game certainly changed everything. It caused this game to most likely go under, which was kind of against what we were going. And, you know, there are people definitely worried for him. But, you know, North Carolina covered with ease after that happened. Duke couldn't hit a three. It was just an awful situation for Duke. This game still finished all the way up to 160 points, even with Zion out. But I expect him to be back. I would say, I would think from the reports that I heard, he's not going to be out over a week even. I think they're going to definitely rest him for the next game. But I can definitely see him coming back maybe a week or two if it's a low-grade sprain, like what people are thinking. He was actually able to kind of hobble off anyway. Of course, I'm no doctor. We'll be keeping track on Zion and retweeting anything that we can hear about him. And other news, very tragic, Jim Boeheim was driving in the interstate in New York, and he ran into a pedestrian. Apparently, a car got in an accident or broke down, and the passenger unfortunately came out of the car, and he was struck by Jim, and that's got to be very tough. You know, I wouldn't know what to think if I accidentally killed somebody, even though it was my fault. Even though it wasn't my fault, it would be very strange, thinking about that. Then probably replaying it in your head a bunch of times, wondering if there's any way you could have avoided that. So definitely my heart goes out to that family, as well as Jim Boeheim's family too, getting through this very tough time. Definitely lesson to be learned. If you fast interstate, stay in your car until the police and ambulances get there, unless maybe somebody's life is completely in danger and you think you can possibly help them. But this is definitely a tragedy, and Jim Boeheim, huge part of college basketball. All right, well, next I want to get into my Big Ten rankings here, and we have a new, well, not new, they were there before, number one, and that's Michigan State. You know, they edge out Purdue, but like I said before, these two teams are very, very close in my book. Michigan State has faced a little adversity against Rutgers at home, but then they just put the pedal to the metal and ended up winning by 11 points. They were losing at half, but they beat Ohio State, they beat Rutgers, they won their last 4 games in a row, including games against Minnesota and Wisconsin. When you look at Purdue, They had that Maryland loss. They won at against Penn State at home. Then that game at Indiana, they couldn't hit any threes. They won by 2 points at the very end. Such a bad game. In Indiana, they may have had a little home cooking, but Purdue should have took care of them a little bit better, and that's why I made the switch. But still, both of these teams are definitely at the top of the Big Ten. Michigan's next. No changes there. Michigan. Then you have Wisconsin is 4th. I have Maryland 5th. I have Iowa 6th. Minnesota 7th. Nebraska is 8th. They keep falling down. Got destroyed at Penn State recently. Ohio State is 9th. Indiana is 10th. Illinois is 11th. And I'm really thinking about moving Illinois up a little bit more. Penn State is 12th. A little bit of love for destroying an injured Nebraska team. Rutgers is 13th, and Northwestern, still bringing up the bottom of the Big Ten, is 14th. So that's how I kind of rank them, and we'll be updating you every single week where we think these teams are. All right, before we bring in our guests, I want to handicap a couple quick games for you that I was able to throw together for the weekend. So we're looking at Friday, which I believe is February 22nd. I'm looking at Indiana versus Iowa. Iowa's going to be laying about 7 points. The over-under is going to be about 147 here. So, how poor is this Indiana team when you look at what they've been doing? I see them as the Oklahoma Sooners of last year. I mean, last year Sooners had that young kid Trey Jones, I believe his name was, it was Trey Young. And this year you have Josh Langford, the freshman for top 5 recruit for Indiana. But they both went through their non-conference schedule, destroying really good teams. Indiana beat Louisville, a couple other big games that they had, and then they reached the Big Ten, just like Oklahoma did in the Big 12, and completely collapsed. Just completely. And you wonder if Indiana is going to make the tournament. You wondered that about Oklahoma too. The only Big Ten game that Indiana won was against Michigan State. They've lost every single other one of them, and that was roughly 13 games or so. So that was that's pretty bad. But their big wins against Marquette and Louisville, and Butler, that could be enough to cast them into the tournament just from what they did from the start. But at the same time, this team has really went downhill. Back to the handicap. I got to tell you, if you're looking to bet on Indiana, or if you have been, it's been bad too. 3-10 against the spread in conference play. They only have that one cover, like I said, against Michigan State when they somehow won that game. Now they have to travel to an Iowa team coming off a close loss versus Maryland. Iowa has the 3rd best offense in the Big Ten. Now, they don't have that much of a defense. It ranks last, but they are very, very explosive, especially at home. The best thing that Indiana has going for them is probably that Iowa has the worst defense this game, but nobody's been more bipolar in the Big Ten in the splits, the home road splits, than the Hoosiers. The Hoosiers average 6 less points per game on the road versus home, and they give up 13.5 more points per game on the road than they do at home. I mean, 16 points of difference there. That's a lot. Iowa, on the other hand, is as you would expect, much better at home, allowing 3 less points per game on defense and scoring 4 more points per game at home than on the road. About a 7-point difference there. But they score 82 points per game at home. That's pretty good. The spread's going to be pretty big, seeing that Indiana already lost to this team at home 72-77. 5-point margin at Indiana. And if you look at Indiana's situation, after losing that close game at Purdue, I have to wonder where their minds are at. They almost had them, and they just kind of had another crushing defeat. Now they have to go on the road and travel all the way to Iowa. Looking at these splits, right? These massive splits with Indiana in this situation, Iowa losing to Maryland, I think Iowa comes back big. I think they bounce back after that loss. So even though you're going to be looking at about a 7-8 point spread here, I have this game Iowa 80 to Indiana 69. I think they kind of put it to them. I like Iowa -7, and I lean to the over. All right, let's get into one more game. Ohio State versus Maryland. Maryland, and this is a Saturday game, Maryland's going to be laying about 7 points. Over under is about 130-ish. So this is a road revenge spot here for Ohio State, but how can they be trusted here, right? They only have one true away game that's a win in this whole conference against the bad Indiana team we just discussed. Only one away win in the Big Ten. You're going to see a healthy spread here of about 7 or 8 points in favor for Maryland. But I'm not so sure I want to lay that kind of number, even though Ohio State's only 6-10 against the spread after a win. That's still 7-8 points here when Maryland's coming off a win. Maryland finally got their big road victory, okay, against this Iowa team. Iowa was ranked. So it's always been that, Maryland cannot win on the road against a ranked team. Well, they finally did. So this is kind of a letdown spot, and that's another reason why I'm not necessarily jumping at the spread here. If it's right, I will, but not at 7 or 8 points. The one thing that I can count on is the fact that both of these teams have had some huge defensive performances, right? Both teams play very slow, just like the Big Ten, and they have top 20 defenses in the nation. Ohio State's still top 20 on KenPom. Maryland's top 20 on KenPom. Ohio State also somehow allows 3 less points per game on the road. You think you would allow less at home, but, there's already been a decent sample size here, and they allow 3 points less when they play on the road. So they probably even play a little bit slower. So due to these teams' recent wins, and it might not be a bad idea to check the under here. As long as it's over 128 points or so, Ohio State unders in the conference are 9-5-1, and Maryland, their unders in the conference are 10-6. So I'm loving the trend. I'm taking it under 130, all the way down to 128. Maybe 127. We'll see how it goes. But we're going to nail this under, and that's the play for Saturday. Speaking of Big Ten unders, I ran some numbers myself here, okay? And you might be a little bit surprised, but Big Ten unders all year, these teams are 56.1% as of Tuesday when I ran the numbers. So 56.1% of all Big Ten games have already went under this year. That's a pretty big sample size. And then if you look at in-conference play, it's actually 56.8%. And I believe after Wednesday's games, it might even be closer to 57% now. And that's a pretty interesting thing. Big Ten unders have been hot. Unfortunately, I'm starting to notice the bettors realize this, and if you look at the sharper action, it's pounding the unders right away. So my advice would be, if you like the under in some of these Big Ten games, strange enough, you might want to hit it either right away or right before the game, because there's going to be some bettors that do this professionally and do it quite often, or they just like to bet every day, like all of us, that will be betting these unders just based on this trend. So, normally you take unders right before the game and take overs right away, but in this case, you're going to take the Big Ten unders, I think, right when these games kind of come out. All right, without further ado,